Now that we understand some HTML elements, let's see how we can apply styles to those elements to make them look different when they're rendered out here on the web page. So I've got my basic index HTML file here, and then I've got live server running over here on the right. So I'm going to use CSS or cascading style sheets to describe properties that I want to be applied to different elements here in the HTML. The browser will recognize those elements and change them accordingly. The structure of a CSS description is shown here in the style.css that you find in the starter kit. And it's made up of a selector. In this case, this is the body. And everything inside these curly brackets will be applied to the entire body section of the CSS, or the HTML rather here. So whatever I put in that section is going to apply to all of this area, which is basically the entire content area of the browser. In this case, what is set is one property called background color, and the value that's being applied to that is light blue. So what you see here is a light blue background with the rest of the styles, such as the size of the text, the length of the horizontal rules, and all that, default to whatever the browser's decided to set. So currently we're overriding just one item in the browser, and that's the background color of the body. There are three standard ways to apply styles to HTML elements. So switching back here to the HTML file, the first one is inline. And so I pick a particular element I'm interested in. Let's do this H1 here. And right inside the first H1 tag, I'm going to add some style information that will only affect this one particular H1 tag. And the format here is to add style equals, and then in double quotes, the property and the value that you want to apply. So I'm going to pick color, which will change the text color, and then a colon, and then the color that I want to choose, let's make it something really dramatic like red. So I'm going to save, and we can see that the title has changed to red. Now there's an important thing here in this inline style that we can also see in the CSS file, and that is that the property and the value of that property set to is separated by a colon. We see that here in the background color, there's the colon and then the value. And in addition, in a CSS file, we end it with a semicolon. So that's important so that the browser can understand these different pairs of style elements. So the style only applies to the H1. If I have a second H1 here, when I save it, we'll see that it does not get the style. So this style is in line with this particular H1, and all other H1s and any other elements on the page will not get that same style applied. Another approach is to describe the style information internally in the HTML file. So let me undo the inline style here. I'm going to keep the H1s. And for this demonstration, I'm going to comment out this. I'm not sure what kind of problems it might cause, so I'm going to comment it out for now, and then we will talk about what it actually is. So inside the head, I can add a style block, and in between I can describe different style settings just like we see them here in the CSS file. And all of these styles are going to be applied to everything in this page. So let's just do the H1 style again. So I'm going to create the selector H1 entry here, and I'm going to give it a color of red, and remember to put my semicolon on the end. And so now I've defined for all H1s on this entire page that their color should be red. So when I save this, we can see that both H1s and any other H1s I added are all red. I could add multiple styles here and we would see them all change at the same time. Now you notice my background went away, the background color, and that's because I commented this out. So this was being applied, but when I commented it out, it went away. I can add it in here if I want. And make this look the way it did before. Okay, so now we're back to that. A couple of interesting things to note whether you're doing styles in the CSS file or doing inline. You probably noticed here that VS Code is trying to help us a little bit. So as soon as I type a colon, it recognizes that I have a property of background color and it lists all the colors. And this is a pretty long list here of colors by name that I can select with a little color sample. So that's kind of nice. I can look here and this looks nice. Maybe I'll add this in. Save. And we can see that it changed a little bit different than the light blue we had before. Same thing here with the H1, and it will offer you different settings based on whatever the property is that you selected. So this again is going to be color. I can pick brown, and other properties that I choose may give a different list here of options that you can choose. Now the last option is the one that was already set up in the starter kit, and it's the option that we'll be using in CS-102. So I'm actually going to copy that, and I'm going to put it here along with the that look a little nicer. There we go. Along with the background that was already there. I'm going to remove all of the style stuff. I don't want to do inline styles. And I am going to remove the comments here so that this will be active again. So the HTML file is now looking to the CSS file for all of the information that it needs. I'm going to save this, and then when I go and save this, well, we can see that things changed a little bit. We've got the brown color for all of our H1s, and we have a light blue back here. I can change a different color here. And when you're trying to get the list back, you have to go all the way back past the colon and type the colon again, and then VS Code will show you the list. So keep that in mind. So dark slate gray. Let's choose that. Ooh, that is quite a color. So does not look great with brown, that's for sure. So we've got our styles over here started in the style.css file, and we are bringing that file in to the HTML file here with this link. And that tells the browser when it's processing this file to render it, it needs to go over, get this file, be aware of all the changes that are going to override the defaults in this file and apply them accordingly. So the H1 and the background color are now being set to what we want it to be rather than the browser defaults. The H2s, the horizontal rules, the paragraphs, those are all default still because I don't have any entries here to change them. And one of the reasons that we use the file, the external approach to CSS, is when you get in a couple assignments in to this class, you'll be making multiple pages. And so the nice thing about having an external CSS file is that for every HTML file you make, you can copy and paste this link into that other file, and they will all look the same. So the backgrounds will be the same. Whatever settings you have defined here in your CSS file will apply to all your pages, so they'll look very consistent. So let's clean up a little bit here. I'm going to get rid of this for right now, and I'm going to put this back to light gray. Light blue, actually. There we go. Okay, so we're back here, and I think I'll get rid of this too. So what I want to do now is go over just a few common CSS elements that you will be using in class. And we just saw the first two there, and let's start a P tag here. The first one is the background color, so we can see that applies to everything in the body. In addition, I can put a background color here, and it will apply only to the P type in this case. And let's make it pink. So when I save this, we see that all of the paragraph tags, I've got 4 paragraph blocks here, all get set to default text color, but a pink background. Let's change that to something a little more subtle. How's that? So I like this bisque. Let's do that. Okay. Okay, that's a little nicer. Okay, so we can apply a background color here as well. Now, everything that's not a paragraph tag still has the original body background, and then all the paragraphs have a different body color applied kind of over the top of the body's background color. In addition, we can change the color of the text itself, and let's make that, what's something that would go with that bisque? How about dark gray? So when I save this, we can see that the text changed to a light gray color here, which is ironic because this is called dark gray, on top of the bisque background. Okay, beyond that, I can also change the area that something like this horizontal rule covers. Now, in CSS, things, location on the page, widths, heights, things like that, measurements of elements are typically done in percentages. There are a few different units of measure that you can use, but we're just going to be using a percentage measurement here. And so width-wise, this is 100% of the width. So if I were to make something 50%, then it would only be half the width. It would be only this long. You can see my mouse there. And let's make a style for the HR tag, and I will set that. Let's do 85 and %, and the semicolon. And I see I forgot the semicolon up here. The browser didn't seem to care, and that's lucky for me, but I should fix it. So we can see that the horizontal rules now are a little bit shorter. They are default centered. So this is about 7.5% pushed in on this side, 7.5% pushed on that side, and 85% overall. We can change it to 50. Let's change it to 30, something really dramatic. Okay, so we can see they got very tiny. So that's the width. Back up here on the P tag, I can change the font size. And the font size is a different unit of measure, that is pixels. Again, there are several different units of measure that you can use, but for font size, I would recommend sticking with pixels if you are going to change things around a little bit. So let's change the pixels to, let's say, 16 px, and that indicates 16 pixels. When I save, we can see that it looks like nothing changed, and that is likely 16 or maybe 14, 15, maybe 17 or 18 was already the default size, so we really didn't see anything change. Let's bump it up a little bit, go to 20, and there we can see that the text has grown in size. It now takes up more room on the page because it's now 20. Let's go back. Let's make it smaller then. There we go, so it's actually smaller. And then In addition to the size, we can also change the font used. Now this one's a little strange because each browser may support a different set of fonts. So you as a developer creating web pages have to anticipate that different users are going to use different browsers, and they may pick a browser that does not support a font that you want to use. In that case, if you define a single font and the browser that someone is using to look at your page does not support that font, doesn't know how to render it, it will just go back to its default, and the page won't look like the way you want it to. So the convention in defining fonts in CSS is to provide a list of fonts in the order that you would prefer them to be rendered. And the property is called font family. And there are several built-in ones that VS Code's going to offer. And you can see there are 3 different fonts in order. This has 3. I think 3 is, well, this one has 4. 3 or 4 is kind of the standard. You can add as many or as few as you like. The more you add, the more likely it's going to be look like something that you want it to. But all 3 of these fonts look pretty similar, and they're pretty standard. So if you include these 3 fonts, let's say if your browser doesn't support Courier New, it's probably going to support Courier. That's been around for a long time. And then if not, then it'll switch to Monospace. And if your browser supports none of those, it's probably an older browser, and the browser will just go to its default. So when I save here, let's see if we can see a change. Let's change the color here to something to make it easier to see. Well, let's not do black. That is pretty dark. How about coral? That's better. Oh, and we can see that the font family kicked in. Now, I'm not sure which one of these 3 fonts the browser is able to render, but all 3 of these are very similar. So it picked hopefully the first one, but maybe the second or the third one. Now I can change that again and pick something a little more dramatic. Oops, let me see. And this is VS Code. This little red squiggles tell me I've got some kind of mistake here. VS Code's pretty smart about how HTML should be structured and how CSS should be structured. It tries to help you. So if you see a red squiggle, there's something wrong. And sometimes, yeah, you can hover your mouse over the red squiggle area and it will tell you there's something wrong here. Tells you what to expect. But I recognize it right away. I got too many semicolons. And although VS Code's not helping me here, I'm missing my semicolon at the end. Okay, so I saved that, and so our font has changed quite a bit. So that's font families. And then the last thing that I want to cover is text alignment. So this text, pretty much as best as a browser can, is kind of spread out almost 100% of the area. There's a little space here so the letters aren't like right up against the edge and hard to read. So it's a little bit of space, but for the most part they are probably 95 or 96% across the page. But we can play around with that a little bit using the text align property. And let's see what VS Code offers. So center, left, and right, those make sense. There's some other ones here that I would suggest you don't use in this class. Some of them, like inherit, initial, unset, those rely on understanding how cascading styles override one another. And so it's kind of like the font family in that you could pick something like an internal or a start, and that's telling the browser to decide how to align it according to other settings and other things on the HTML page. So I would recommend staying away from those and just stick with ones that sound familiar, like center, left, and right. So let's do center. And so we can see that the text, although it still spans most of the distance, any place that there's a gap, it's pushed in to be centered, just like the horizontal rules are. And so we can play around here. Left, I believe, is default. So it goes back to looking the way it was before. Actually, a little bit more. These are all lined up here on the left, and there's a little bit of space over. And then, of course, right is going to do just the opposite and push everything over to line up on the right. And whatever space is necessary is going to end up here on the left side. So I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, so those are the basic properties that you might be applying here. And you can just gang them all up to create a nice looking page. In addition to defining a set of properties that you want to be applied based on the selector of the particular HTML element, you can also define your own custom settings and give them a unique name, a name that you choose. These are called classes, and they start with a period. So if I create a block here, my own class, and then the same structure inside here, I can put a list of properties that I can then go in and apply this class to elements that I want that to cause a change to the elements it's applied to. So text color is a pretty basic one. So let's do color, and let's do something very different. Dark red, that would be very different. Okay, so when I save, nothing changes because the browser doesn't know what to do with this. It doesn't see that it's related to anything on the page yet, and that's because it's not a standard HTML thing. It is your own custom style, a group of styles that you can put together, and then you get to pick what things it gets applied to. So I'm going to apply it to this, the H2 that says section 1, and the way to tell the browser you want those styles, those custom styles applied, is with the class element, again double quotes, and then the name of the class, this time without the period. Okay, so as long as I typed it right, and let's check. So here I've got my own class with a period in front, and that's important so that the browser knows this is a class and not a mistake. And then here we tell the browser that this particular H2, we want to apply that style just to this element. So when I save, we can see that section 1 changed here. Now, this doesn't matter which type of HTML element it's applied to. So if I were to copy this and say paste it into one of the p tags here and save just the first one, we can see that I made a typo. And now, there we go. So we can see a couple of interesting things. One is now the text color for these two things that are of class my own class are indeed the color that I chose. If I change that and save it, we can see that now they're just standard red. But in addition, all p tags have a bunch of other settings already applied to them. So in this case, the background color, the font size, family, alignment, all that stuff still applies to this one, but my own class, or the class that I defined and applied to this one p tag, any conflicting properties, the class wins. The class's value gets set instead of the elements class. So in this case, everything else gets applied to the p tag, and then that color for this class gets applied over the top of it. So with that, you should be able to, in our assignments, make changes to your elements and then define styles and apply them accordingly to make your assignments look like the assignment pages that you'll see in Canvas.